be limited to working with biology. A lot of the skills that you pick up on your way, especially during your PhD, end up being very managerial. So you could switch careers very easily. It's not like if you pick biology and you
uh, jargon. People say, "Oh, I've read that in science," but they don't really link that with, like, someone says, "Okay, all things are moving towards north because the diagram in the seventh class textbook shows."
So basically, we were looking forward to write a blog on the topic of maybe informing a high school student on making a choice between MBBS and studying pure science biology. So basically, we have seen this in high schoolers that if they like biology as a subject in class 11th and 12th, they have a tendency to go for MBBS without knowing what the other side has to offer. Similarly, we also see people who have taken up pure science, BSc in zoology or botany or any other field in biology, but they are not aware of what MBBS leads to. So we were trying to write a blog from which will inform these high schoolers about both the fields, the pros and cons of each, the kind of lifestyle, the kind of options available to them, so that they can make an informed choice about it. That's the idea. Okay, so basically, we have already spoken to someone from the MBBS background about that side of the story. So we were looking forward to speak to you because you have uh, already done your master's and your bachelor's degree in biology, I think in botany, and then you're working in ecology right now. So you're doing a PhD, and you will have a greater idea than we have about the lifestyle of academics or the research scenario both in India and outside. So maybe you could tell us something about these fields.
I mean, I'm really glad to be here to talk to you guys because this is something, like I mentioned in the show, something really important to me and something I've often had conversations with people in my class about why they end up choosing medicine when they actually do like biology. But on the other hand, I'm really glad to know that quite a few of you are actively studying biology. So it's not like I live a very different life from yours. So I'm sure you will also have interesting and important inputs. But yeah, you were right. I studied my bachelor's in botany in Mumbai University. I was studying in a college called Ruparan. And then I got selected to do this Erasmus Mundus Masters in Europe, which was fully funded. And I then was able to study tropical ecology. And since then, I've been moving around a bit, and I'm now in my third year of my PhD, which should ideally be over in a year and a half. But like with all PhDs, I'm not sure how we will be managing things. But yeah, no, life as a biologist is fun. You get to be on field.
I study ecology now. It's a mixture of being in the field and I work with data. So it's quite variable, I would say, depending on what you choose. Like you mentioned, like you were studying zoology, so I'm guessing you get to go out on field a lot, but you also collect specimens, and I'm guessing you process them in the lab somehow. So
Yeah, we
yeah,
do that
I
to
mean,
some extent. So yes,
yeah,
even we have a lot of field work and lab work, a mixture of both.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't know what I could add that would be very general to the life of a biologist. I think. It's very variable. There are so many options, and everybody ends up picking something that they are interested in if it's actually possible to do that. So, yeah.
So maybe you can give us an idea about like the lifestyle of an academic in general, like not depending
Hmm.
on which branch of biology you're in, just the general life in academia. If you can maybe tell us something about the differences between that in India and abroad.
Okay. That's a good question, really. I worked partly in a lab in India during my master's thesis. So I wouldn't say I have too much experience with the academic world. It's more of hearsay and the little experience I did have working in a lab there. But as an academic, you're expected to publish all the time. You're expected to come up with novel research ideas, and then the competition is kind of cutthroat, and it's very publication heavy. So you're expected to have a lot of research outputs all the time. And if you are not yet a PI, which is great, you don't have to worry about looking for grants. But once you're at that stage, quite a lot of your life becomes about chasing after grants. So you need to think a lot about what you would like to do and what kind of research would be interesting, not only to you, but also to the funding agency. A lot of what we do at the moment is fundamental. So we are looking at more of fundamental ecology-based questions in pollination. So our funders are mostly people who are interested in furthering basic science. But other ecologists look at applied ecology, so they're funded also by industry. So it depends on what you end up looking at. My PI before this was looking at restoration ecology, so a lot of his projects were then funded by these industries like coal power plants and petrochemicals, where they wanted to try and restore the environments that they had destroyed in the past. So there's that. But other than that, it's a lot of thinking, a lot of writing, and gets very very monotonous very fast if you're not interested in it. That's something nobody had prepared me for when I was very interested in studying biology or research in general, because you enter research because you're very passionate about it. You don't do research because it's something that gives you money. You only do research if you really really like doing science. And as you're progressing through your levels, in your bachelor's you have a lot of variety of courses that you study, and in your master's it gets a bit more specialized, and you reach a point where you're doing a thesis or you're doing like some actual research projects, and at that point you are doing more of the same over and over again until you find your results, and it gets very monotonous very fast. So if you're not prepared for it, it can be very difficult to deal with, and this is something that happened to me also. Thankfully, like I still got to be in field and I collect data, so that's nice. But it was very difficult for me in the beginning to get used to that. You also asked about how academia in India is different from academia in Europe. From what I have noticed, I worked on a mini thesis for my bachelor's, which was extracurricular. In my university, we did not need to do a bachelor's thesis. So I worked with a research lab which had other PhD students. It was a really good experience in the sense that I would not have had any exposure to research techniques if I hadn't been in that lab. But I also quickly realized that there's a very strict hierarchy, and it is a formal as well as informal hierarchy. Your PI, she was a nice person. I don't mean any offense to her, but uh, your ideas are quite strictly controlled by the PI, and you're expected to know all the time, at least like at these non Ivy League institutes, that you are an inferior person in that lab, like you are still learning. And somehow I did not feel like they respected my opinion so much, which maybe at that time I shouldn't have been anyway. But yeah, there was that. But on the other hand, in these Ivy League institutes, I worked in IISc for a little bit, and I noticed that there was still this formal structure. It was less visible. People are more casually referring to each other. There is more of an exchange of ideas, but you still notice that there's a bit of a power dynamic, whether it is visible to you or to students who are senior than you. Here, I noticed that things are not as evident. You're mostly left to what you want to do, but it's very variable from lab to lab. Where I work, there is like an established project that a lab has, and then the students come in and they find their own way within those projects. There's not too much of freedom to develop your own project because you come associated with a project grant that has already been awarded to a lab. But I think elsewhere in the US, for example, quite often I notice that students apply for their own funding and then they enter a lab, and there they have near complete control over their PhDs, where their supervisor is more of a guide to them, and that somehow appeals to me more. But there are pros and cons to everything. No, it was a very long, convoluted answer, I think.
No, but it was very useful, so thank you for that. Uh, Also, you have chosen academia, but do you have any idea about, say, if someone doesn't want to go into teaching or into
Mhm.
research, then what are the options? Like, what are the jobs available to them after they, say, complete a master's degree in biology?
If someone doesn't want to do research specifically, or if they don't want to teach, the question depends.
For both, like if they don't want to teach and they don't want to do research. So, what are the
Okay.
options they have at that point?
Like, I think teaching isn't the only thing that ends up as a career option once you study biology or any fundamental science field. You might end up doing research without having to teach. So, if you're not somebody who enjoys teaching, you could have your own research lab where you just work on research, and that could also be in a research institute and a university, but also in think tanks which fund this kind of research. You could also choose to go work with industry where they fund specific kinds of research, and then you don't have a complete freedom to do what you want to do. But on the other hand, there's a lot of money in it, and if you enjoy the kind of research that industry needs, mostly it is applied, so you're not doing too much of fundamental work. But it is really cool stuff anyway. So if you're interested in doing work that industry supports, then that's an option. You could choose to go into work that governments or NGOs do, where you work with policy. For example, a lot of my master's cohort graduates ended up working with policymakers, helping them make decisions about the environment and how to conserve things. You could also be at the interface of industry and research, where a lot of these consulting firms employ biologists to take stock of the environment. For example, I work with ecologists, so my example would be more close to that. But to do these environmental impact assessments, where you're trying to look at different projects, maybe developmental projects or industrial projects, and how they might affect the environment, and whether it is possible to have mitigation measures, whether the project is really viable, or of course, what they could do to make this project possible. It's also a tricky industry to be in, I think, because I think going into biology, you have some ideas about conservation usually. Not that they should always be this way, but you have certain biases and you need to keep them aside. I, for example, I'm biased towards conservation. But if you were to work in an industry like this, you need to learn to put aside that bias and look at the pure science and what it tells you. Sometimes it might not tell you what you want to hear, and you need to learn to respect that and listen to it. But you could also set up different kinds of labs, and what you learn in biology does not have to be limited to working with biology. A lot of the skills that you pick up on your way, especially during your PhD, end up being very managerial. So you could switch careers very easily. It's not like if you pick biology and you learn later that it's not really for you, you can always switch. It doesn't leave you at a dead end.
Okay, so that was also very informative. Uh, and in general, like you could do this now, or you could maybe give us a more detailed answer to this later. But say if we have to compare between the life of a doctor, say a junior doctor, and that of someone in academia, like a PhD student, then what exactly would we have to say if we are trying to explain this to a high school student? Like from the
Ah,
perspective of a high school student, how do we put forth this difference?
It's a kind of a difficult question to answer, really. I don't know. I have cousins who study medicine and who I have watched go through medical school very closely. And I think the philosophy of what you do is very different, but the lifestyle is not too different in this as a student. Later, it might end up being very different because you have different lifestyles based on your career, of course. But as a student, I noticed that there's like a lot of competition going into medicine at the moment because it's a very popular career back home. But so they ended up studying all the time. I love biology, but I noticed I had a lot of time like preparing for these tests. I wasn't interested in pursuing medicine at any point in my life. So although I did take these entrance exams, also I did not prepare for them at all, and it showed when I got the test results back. Um, but yeah, I think um, if you're not deeply immersed in biology and you're studying it while you're in your bachelor's or your master's, you have tons of time to explore other things that you're doing. You get to be out on field. I am not sure how your experience is in your university, but you get to interact with a lot of different things outside of this college building that you're working in. You get to go to different places, you get to get different kinds of research experience, and you have a more general idea of biology. You learn what fundamental biology is. And when you study medicine, you're studying specific parts of it. You dedicate yourself to the field of medicine, and you are sort of like committed to it. I wouldn't say stuck to it, but committed to it for a really long time. With biology, I think at least like at the bachelor's or master's level, you still have enough of freedom to move around quite a bit. If you don't, you realize it's not for you, you still have quite a lot of freedom. But yeah, it's a very exciting field for me. Studying biology, I liked both zoology and botany, so I spent tons of time just being outside looking at things. And I couldn't believe it that I was just being at my master's level, being paid, and at my bachelor's level, being allowed and given all the time to just be outside and look at birds and plants and flowers and just keep noticing them and learn different aspects of their lives and learn what's inside them, how they interact with things. It was very, very exciting for me. And for me, if you like biology as a subject, you would be happy studying biology as it is. If medicine is nice, but it's a bit more specialized. So if medicine is something you like, and if you want to dedicate yourself towards being a doctor, I think it makes absolute sense to go ahead and do that. But if you're not sure if medicine is a thing for you and you're in love with biology, I think you would end up studying biology. That seems much more logical to me, because then it's very general. You're learning about everything and you're not confined to one specific field. But I will think about this more and maybe formulate it better for you.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
And how did it start for you? When did you feel like you should get into biology? At what
Mhm.
point of your life, or what intrigued you in the first place? Maybe.
I don't mean to set myself apart from other people. That's not why I'm saying this. But I was 5 when I started thinking about plants all the time. Then I wanted to, after everybody, like, I wanted to be a horse rider at some point, but clearly, like, everybody, when they're kids, they have really stupid ambitions. But when I was 5, I was gifted this set of encyclopedia books, and they were picture books full of a lot of information. And I remember like leafing through them, and my favorite ones were the ones where they were explaining about extinction and like processes inside the body and the relationships of different kinds of landscapes to each other. And it wasn't like I really understood what was going on. The pictures were really beautiful, and probably that's what caught my attention in the first place. But I remember growing up, like looking at butterflies all the time, looking at plants outside my house, and my parents were also nice enough to encourage me observing things, and they played a lot of nature documentaries for me growing up. I still had cable TV, and like maybe you people also did. And nature documentaries played on there all the time. And once I was 15, I started looking more seriously about what I could possibly be doing. And I knew I did not want to study commerce. My thoughts were looking at biology, or I really liked learning languages. So those were my two options. And my parents at no point said to me, "This is a very stupid idea of yours. You should not be doing this." Or like, "We don't know what you're going to be doing, so we don't want you to do this. We want you to do the specific thing that we like you to do." So they had no idea, of course, what it would be like to have their daughter go study plants, because I then wanted to study botany. They know that it wouldn't pay well at all, but they did not discourage me. They were always like, "You go ahead and you're going to be happy studying what you will. So try and look for options that you will find." And so they helped me look for what career options I had. They spoke to friends who knew other people who were studying fields in biology. My aunt is a doctor, and it was quite helpful having her also assure me that not studying medicine was not the end of the world if you liked biology. At some point I was like, oh, is this a dead end? Is this really what I want to do? But I knew that it was nature that I wanted to study, so I slowly built towards that. Um, yeah, and I think what helped was that my parents were really with me and they did not discourage me. They always pushed me to look for opportunities everywhere. I applied wherever I could for my bachelor's and my master's. And yeah, all through I was able to find opportunities and I did not stop applying to places. And I think that opened a lot of options for me.
Right. So, from a very young age, you were into biology.
Yeah, yeah.
So, as I understand, what generally happens with students, because I've been working as a teacher for 1 year, they think of all the science. You show them all intriguing things. Maybe they like it, but sometimes when they read the books, that's like them being double-minded. Sometimes they
Mhm.
think of all this science as one thing, or let's say you show them some fancy experiments or what, they think in that direction. And then when it comes to books again, it's a different logic that works. They don't see them as integrated. They cannot
Mhm.
relate their textbooks with whatever the biological aspect or even any science aspect that is happening. And that one part of that is even linked to how pseudoscience works. They
Hmm.
know the textbook stuff, and when someone says something, someone picks up a word or a jargon. I don't want to take names, but yeah. So that with a long white beard, if someone says some jargon, people say, "Oh, I've read that in science," but they don't really link that with like someone says, "Okay, all things are moving towards north because the diagram in the seventh class textbook shows that arrows are pointed towards north." That's just telling that the magnetic field direction is that. That's a convention chosen. If I had chosen different convention, it would have been there. But people just think that, oh, that makes sense. But logically think you should be like applying that as well. But all they remember is the jargons and whatever is being said, they think in a very different sense. Or let's say someone talks about positive energy, negative energy, whatnot, right? So they are not even linked to the energy that we study here, but they work in two sets. Did it also happen with consensus? Not in the sense of pseudoscience, but were you able to link with what are you were observing in nature with the textbook and what the curriculum hard curriculum requires you to do in school age? I mean,
In school, yeah, honestly, I think the Indian syllabus, at least like in my state and where I studied, wasn't really nice. I studied at the state board, and the textbooks, I think they do the best they can. But it was very difficult to connect what I was studying in class with whatever I could see outside. I was lucky enough to have these nice books and magazines that my parents were finding from different places for me to read. So I was able to connect those, but from the textbook, I think it's quite difficult. Also, just because of the education system back home, I think it's we end up looking at things in the classroom. I was also teaching high school students for a while, preparing them for these science competitive exams, and I was teaching them biology. And I noticed that they're so much more interested in things when you take them out into the field and you show them things. It's very difficult to teach biology without showing people what it is like because you are studying actual objects. Even cell biology, you could show people things under a microscope. It's possible to show at least a few things under the microscope. Take people out to field. I hate dissections, but I dissected cockroaches with my students because I just thought they would really understand what they were studying then. And then they started bringing more insects to class, which was a different problem in itself. But yeah, it's really difficult with the way our textbooks are structured. And this is something I really like with certain education boards because they push you to go outside and do these other activities. And I think with the population we have and the student teacher ratio, it's really difficult doing these activities with your students even if you really want to do them. So yeah, I think we should be changing both the way we approach teaching biology as well as the books that we used to teach them.
I, for one, I wouldn't believe it's always necessary to actually show some activities, but even just while you teach or when I introduce a topic, I try to link it with a real life application or something that
Yeah.
connects them with something that makes them feel like they are actual things. Like I taught maths, but I always try to include some real life examples, something that's actually going on, right? So that would, in some sense, bring out things. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, good to know. And
No,
moving
it's good.
on, yeah. Uh, So what all you've studied in your school didn't quite connect with it, but did you like the whatever whatever things you studied in the name of biology in school?
I think I'm a bit of a nerd, and I was a very goody two shoes in school. So I liked everything I learned because I just wanted to be a good student when I was in school. But it wasn't enough for me at some point just reading the textbooks because they were very dry and they were boring. So I often picked up books at the local library that I had, and I read through encyclopedias. And I had just, I think we had an old computer, so I had just learned how to use the internet. So I ended up reading a lot on the internet about different things. I'm also very curious by nature, so I ended up looking at a lot of those things. But in school, I really loved biology, but a lot of my friends who did not like it at all were put off by the fact that it is so wordy and things are explained in such an abstract manner that you cannot visualize them very easily. And it gets very boring, except for the few moments when you're learning about some really exciting processes and stuff. But yeah, no, I was in love with biology for a while, but I know friends now who did not like it at all and are now ecologists. And it so happened that even though they did not like it then, they realized that there were parts of biology that they don't like. They like other parts of it. Like they enjoyed going out on field, for example. A lot of my classmates were not from biology backgrounds. They just realized that when they were going out on field or on hikes or just being out in nature with other people, they enjoyed that and they wanted to learn that, but more academically, more formally. And then they switched to biology as a career. But
Right. In
yeah,
fact, I was actually getting there. Sorry, you were saying something. Please
no, no,
continue.
no, no. Go on.
Yeah. So I was just getting there. So what all you studied is something you didn't really like much. So when you
Hmm?
wanted to like take up your 12th, so you did end up choosing biology. So did you know that this is how it is going to be, or uh,
Uh,
did you realize that this is how it might be throughout the academia? Or
you mean biology as a subject, or
like,
that I would
yeah,
be?
yeah,
No, just
entire
to sorry to
curriculum,
interrupt.
like if you're sorry, if you're doing your bachelor's and master's, it will be like 5 years of studying biology. And were you aware that it will be different or it will be the same? Basically because students,
Hmm.
the fact that students go like biology and say, okay, I like biology, hence I'm going for medicine. If you like biology, then go for biology itself. That's what I would say. But
Yeah.
yeah, but the thing is, they don't see the difference between biology that they learn in their school. They like it, but what they learn in medicine is maybe it might be different from what they actually learn. And how about the actual biology? How relatable is it to what you do in your bachelor's, master's, or on a PhD level?
This is again a bit difficult to answer. I think it's easier for somebody from medicine to say what part of biology remains the same because they're learning a specific part out of their syllabus and then taking that ahead and studying that more deeper.
I mean,
But when you're,
even they study it to the end of treating the patients before
yeah,
it
yeah,
gets.
yeah,
So that's a
yeah,
completely different thing. But whatever biology, even whatever they study for medicine, it's for a different purpose altogether.
yeah.
But what about biology? Would it be an extension of that? Let's say there's my niece who is in, let's say, 6, 7. So she wants to take up biology for life. So let's say, what would you say? How much of what they have learned in school would be would it feel like it's an extension of what we have studied? What do you think of it? That's my question basically. Does it
Hmm.
feel like it's a continuation, extension, or like a separate genre? What?
I think it's an extension, but it's a sudden and very wide extension. And what you learn in your school is a bit general, but it's also narrow in the sense that you're just teaching students a basic stuff about biology. In your, from what I feel, in your 11th and 12th, it gets a bit deeper, and then you're learning different processes, different parts of the subject, but still it's a bit superficial. In your bachelor's and then at your master's level, in your bachelor's, it's still depending on what you choose and how your course is arranged. Sometimes you're studying zoology only, sometimes you're studying botany only. Sometimes you can do a dual degree or triple degree program where you're like majoring in many different subjects. In my uni, it wasn't the case, but I know in Bangalore and maybe in DU also, it's possible to major in two subjects at the same time. So then you're studying those subjects deeply and you're studying different aspects of that subject deeply. So then it doesn't really tie back to what you were studying in school, in the sense that you cannot tell specifically where your syllabus is linking back. But what you learn in school can easily be envisioned going there, I think. Especially if you're looking at just the environmental side of things. I think it becomes more fundamental at the bachelor's and master's level with biology. You're looking at very basic things, but you're looking at them very deeply. So it does connect, but it doesn't connect as clearly as people think. So your niece, for example, who is in school and who would like to study biology, um, if she is not too interested in processes with the human body and she is interested in the rest of it also, then yes, it makes absolute sense to go study biology as a whole rather than medicine specifically. I know that doesn't like entirely answer your question, but
That's fine. Post that, people, as you said, mostly go for academia or teaching, right? After they
yeah.
PhDs. And do you know anyone who? Where do you do your bachelor's and master's first?
I did my bachelor's in Ruparel College. It's affiliated to the Mumbai University, so still in Mumbai where I grew up. And then for my master's, I switched to studying in Europe. I was lucky enough to apply for and get an Erasmus Mundus scholarship. So I was completely funded to study tropical biodiversity and ecology, which is a bit of a paradox since I was studying that in Europe, which is not tropical at all. But it's a very nice course, and I was able to apply for it during my bachelor's, and so that's what led me to do my PhD here.
Right. And then you had a lot of classmates with you who studied biology. So did they all end up choosing academia? Obviously they would. So what would they do?
Yes, very few of my friends from my bachelor's, especially, ended up in academia. A lot of them actually ended up switching careers. This is a bit of a shame because not everybody who takes biology as a graduate subject in India actually wants to study biology. Quite often, I observe that
That's the
there are
same for
people.
all fields. Yeah.
Yeah. All of these fundamental fields. It's a real shame because they want to do something else and they could not get into the course of their liking, which might not actually be what they like. It's something that they
Sometimes
have.
they go to
Yeah.
biology because they hate mathematics.
Yeah, for example, that. But a lot of my classmates in my first year of my bachelor's were people who wanted to study medicine, so they were gone. Then there were a lot of people who were studying biology while they could figure out what they could do, and a lot of these students wanted to study for UPSC exams, and they took up biology because it left them with a lot of time to do these courses and that helped them study. So they switched to that. But people who were really studying biology for the sake of studying biology, not all of them ended up in academia either. A lot of my friends have since joined NGOs where they don't necessarily work with biology, but they help with collecting funds, for example. Some are passionate about outreach, so they help go teach people about not only biology but the environment and their relationships with each other. Some help with policy and governance. There are some who, like I said before, went into environment impact assessment with industry. Uh, and yeah, like a lot of them wanted to work with the government, but more officially. So they did, again, take these UPSC exams, but to work with these more official positions.
Yeah, right. And as for uh, your, let's say, work-life balance, how would it be? Sorry if I
Ah,
triggered some PTSD.
oh, you haven't triggered PTSD because it would be proposed, I am like presently in it. But yeah, it's a tricky situation. This is something that I think might be different from people studying medicine. Uh, at your bachelor's and master's level, you're pretty much doing everything that's structured for you. So you're working and studying in a structured environment. You don't have anything to worry about because somebody else is arranging things for you, with the exception of your thesis, which at that point is not even. It doesn't affect anything in your life. It's not very consequential. It's good to learn while you're doing those things, and it's a great time to just gain as much as experience as possible without having to worry about the consequences if you want to stay in biology. At the PhD level and above that, you're mainly working on your own project, and you don't have anything structured in your life. You are your own boss, which is a curse and a blessing at the same time. There is a lot of difficulty balancing work life, like you said. But there are two sides of this, I think. There are some people who are stuck in labs where their PIs control the projects and they expect the student to perform at a certain level. And then you might be one of those people stuck in a toxic work culture where you're expected to work all the time, even on weekends, and then you have no life outside the lab. And that might be one reason why your work life balance is a bit messed up. In other situations like my own, there's nobody controlling my timetable. It's just me, which is a problem because I don't know where to draw the line between stopping work myself. And since it is all me, I feel personally responsible for what's happening with the project. And if the project fails, I take it personally. It should not be the case. But it's difficult to figure it out because you're going from a very constructed atmosphere to suddenly having control of absolutely everything. So if you're very organized, it makes perfect sense. You will have a good work-life balance. Nobody's going to bother you. And most of the expectations that you put on yourself are the reason your work-life balance is a bit messed up. So yeah, like you need to learn to put your project aside of yourself. Like there's you and there's the project, and those things are not linked to each other. But if you manage to do that, life as a biologist is incredibly nice. You get to work on what you like to do. You get to be on field if you were like working on something in ecology. You're actually contributing towards furthering knowledge in like really, really small, in seemingly inconsequential ways. But you're learning something new all the time. You're working towards learning something new all the time. So yeah, it's nice that way. But it's not a corporate job. You're not expected to like work from 9 to 5 and you go home and that's it. No, that's not happening.
Right. And how about a life after that? After PhD, what are the job and the jobs that are involved? Would the work life balance be of the same nature, or how will it be in general?
If you were to stay in academia, I think it typically worsens a bit because um, you are no longer a PhD student. You need to secure funding for what you do. So even if you work as a postdoc in a lab, you're typically expected to help your PI gain those grants. So you're researching things, and it's a very insecure lifestyle in that sense, unless you're in a very cushy institute where they're really well funded and you're able to do stuff. It's you don't have too much of stability, and you need to make peace with the fact that you don't have too much stability of where you live, what you do, and how much money you will earn. But as a PI, especially, your job seems to shift from being more of a researcher to more of a manager. And then your work life balance is really messed up because you're constantly worrying about how much funding your lab has, what are the things that you need to do to get your lab running and keep it running like that. But if you were to switch to industry, you don't have this kind of a problem because then you work as if you were a corporate employee. Even if you were working in an NGO, is your work life balance is better because there's work and it's not tied in directly to your livelihood. So even if you don't have the same output that you were expected to, it's sometimes okay.
Yeah. And what would a job of, let's say, at the end of all of this, what would the job involve? If for a kid who is interested in biology, who wants to go take up biology, at the end, like, after all the education process over, PhD, postdocs, and they got into a professor job or some principal investigator job, what would it generally entail? Would they be at the freedom to go, like, do the stuff they like, even if more or less considering all the practical implications, they
Mhm.
compromise a little bit here and there, but still, would the job be as they envisioned it, or how should they envision that it should be?
I know I've been like sounding really pessimistic during this talk, but it's not like this all the time. You have a lot of freedom to pursue the things you like. You just need to keep trying a little harder to do that. But once you're at a point where you've established yourself as a researcher, and I don't mean in the sense that people know who you are or like you've published a lot of papers. No, when you have the skills that you need to have, you have tremendous potential to go and look for the things that you actually want to do, that the things that make an impact on your own life that you find meaningful. Like if you were a kid who wants to go study paleontology at the end and you want to just be at a dig site and do exactly that and you don't care about the rest of it, yes, you can end up doing exactly that. There's tremendous potential for you to do that. And people will pay for you to do that, so you will not die hungry either. So yeah, you will end up doing exactly what you like doing. I wanted to, for example, study exactly insects and how they interact with flowers, and now I do that. I get paid to do that. There are aspects of it I don't like, but most of it, yeah, it's amazing. I get to look at plants and insects all day long.
Right. And Chaitanya, Rahul, you're planning to take up academia path, right? So, and Rahul, I think you said you're gravitating towards biology these days, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it tells me that actually in a recent survey that was conducted in NICES, I hope you know of the program, right? They have a
Yeah, I
BSM,
do, I do.
just like so. After the first year, they have to make a choice or something like that. In a survey, a lot of about vast majority of them chose biology, right, Rahul?
Hmm.
That was
Yeah.
very surprising.
Out of 163, it was like 54 people chose biology
Wow,
and then
that's
45
great.
for physics and
Yeah, I know
numbers.
three, four people who joined with the idea of taking up physics in these ICERTs and NICERs, and they all gravitated towards biology somehow. Physics to biology is kind of a wide shift, you know.
Yeah.
That's good.
If I may ask, like, why did you guys choose or will want to choose biology? I know Dushyant, no, but Damayanti and now maybe Rahul and Chaitanya.
Okay, so the question is for us.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. In my case, it's not like I love biology as a whole subject. Like till 12th, what I had learned, it was not that interesting for me. But after coming to my college and when I started learning, like it was a different experience for me because the perception of towards biology for me, it changed a lot. It was so much different. And now basically I'm not interested into it's like I'm interested in astrobiology actually. Like
that's very cool.
uh, so it is like how chemistry changed to life that it gave birth to biology. That's the thing which I'm so much interested in. So I thought like first taking chemistry as a major, but then I thought biology would help me more in getting into this. So that's why it is biology.
That's
That's
really cool. Like that's a very fascinating reason to choose biology. I know just one other person who wanted to study astrobiology, and I'm not too sure what they're doing now. But yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, there is one institute in India that's seriously pursuing that. I think it's Amity University or something. They have a separate
Is it?
section for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They have an investigator. I think he's come from NASA or something. If I remember right.
Siddharth Pandey, right? He's doing his
Yeah,
PhD
right.
with
Yeah,
uh, he is getting funded by NASA now. And there's one
yeah.
professor in ISET Pune also, like Sudha Rajamani. She's also doing in astrobiology.
I see, I see. Very cool. I wish you luck. I hope if you really like astrobiology that you study it.
Yeah. Damayanti Chaitanya.
For me, I always liked it. From the time I was in grade six, I really liked the subject, and I was pretty sure that I want to do this. Like for me, it was either biology or history, and then eventually genetics and evolution seemed more exciting, and it was like studying the history of living systems. So I was like, okay, I'll just go for this, and I guess even after that, my choices in the field of biology also changed. Like earlier, I was mad about genetics and evolution. Now I like neuroscience, but but whatever it is, I think my interests were always in the field of biological sciences, so I never had to think of anything else when choosing this.
No, that's really cool. But I mean, genetics is a fascinating field, but I felt the same way. Like after a point, I did not
Yeah.
want to study it anymore. But in
Maybe the
school,
lab work is a bit intensive in
it was, yeah,
genetics labs. It's a bit monotonous, just same thing all over again.
yeah. Ah, but this is something that I think is important to consider. Biology as lab work, biology is very different from field work in biology. If it's not as romantic as field work,
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
so yeah.
Yeah, Chaitanya, I think we have talked much today.
Yeah, I there was some issue with the connection, but I think I'm audible now. For me, it was never my interest was never in biology until 10th standard. Like I was towards mathematics. I wanted to pursue maths, even in like I always used to say I'll take maths, and my parents would be like, "It's too difficult. It's too difficult." But then in 10th standard, I got hold of a book which was about brain, and I don't know, it was so interesting. I started reading more about it, and in 11th standard, I decided that let's go for MBBS because at that time I had no idea that there's something about research and you could get into like, there's some bachelors and masters and you could get into proper lab or something. So the only thing I knew for biology was MBBS. So I thought let's take biology, and brain, mind fascinated me. So I took psychology with it. And slowly during my 11th standard, I started reading a lot of books about evolution, genetics, and stuff, and the brain, neuro. So after that, I decided that it's biology. I can't, I mean, after some time, like during my mid 12th, I was like, I have to do something in this, whether even if it's not MBBS, I have to go somewhere in this. And right now, it's like bachelor's. Although I was very disheartened when I couldn't get into MBBS, but somehow pulled through, and I'm in a good situation right now also. So it's kind of a win-win situation, not bad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
thanks for
glad
that.
we had. Yeah, and yeah, in fact, like that's one of the reasons that we are working on this citizens of science. You should see like people
Yeah,
being unaware that biology in itself is a field and mistaking medicine itself for biology, although the name itself is very obviously different. But uh, and I think they'll also. I wanted to talk about your how you applied abroad, how you got your internships,
hmm,
career advice. But I think this is too much for today. We talked a lot, so maybe some other time. Actually, we're
sure.
looking for people who will be like, sort of like a resource person for us. Like let's say we had to publish a
Hmm.
blog post, someone we can like for tax approach them and then expect to get
Yeah,
results.
sure.
That would be good if you
If
would be
you'd
one of them.
like to have me on board, I count me in. I would really like to help. Yeah,
Yeah, we will be more than happy. Yeah. Thanks a lot
yeah,
for that. And
yeah.
yeah, we can talk about maybe Damayanti, you have any certain things in your mind?
The for the blog about MBBS and biology, I think whatever she said yesterday is today is really like good, and it's going to cover a lot for our blog. But apart from that, if we could interact with you about the whole process of applying abroad and navigating through academia in like PhD and applications and scholarships, maybe that could also be useful because a lot of people look for that information in random places and they don't get it. So since you had applied for a scholarship at your for your masters and you are pursuing PhD now, so maybe you could give us some more information about how you applied or what all scholarships you looked for at that time.
You'd like to talk about it now? Because I mean, I have time, but if you have something else scheduled,
Anything,
I
or
can.
if you want, you could send us a list of whatever you did
Yeah,
and
sure, sure.
anything that suits you, anything that's convenient
No,
for
I'm
you.
fine. Like I don't have anything else planned for now. So it's really up to you guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think this is really important because a lot of students have been contacting me recently because it's about to be admission season again, and
Yeah.
about how they could go around approaching PIs and making applications. And I think as students, we're incredibly lost. It's really
Yes,
sad because
like
a lot of these
so many
opportunities go
people
missing.
know they like, yeah, they know they want to do research, but like most of us don't have the exact information about how to apply or like how to go about looking for opportunities and exactly who to approach or what kind of people to take help from. So it
Yeah.
often leads us to really confusing situations. So Uh,
Yeah, like it's
Maybe
a
that we could
shame.
write something about that.
Sure, sure. Because even my supervisor, like he opened a PhD position very recently for this intake, and a lot of students from India applied, and I was very excited. Like I was like, oh, maybe there's one more person who would come. But we had to reject them because it just happens that they're not able to showcase the skills that they have on their CV, and nobody teaches us how to apply for things. We write a really bad CVs. And it wasn't like these students were not capable of being good PhD students. I could see it, but I could see it. But a PI would not be able to see it if they were not from the same country. So we really need something like this is very important, and something catering specifically to Indian students is especially more important because we don't have exposure to these things. So I would really like to help. There are many resources I have, like a list of them, and I would be happy to talk
Yeah,
about them whenever
that'd
you'd
be
like.
good. That'd be good. In fact, actually, yeah, we could have continued for some time, but then I think it's better we come prepared first with our questions and all.
I
Then
have
we'll have
no
a
issue.
talk.
Like, I am glad to talk to you whenever.
Yeah, right. So we'll come with uh, prepared agenda and prepared questions that have to be answered.
Oh, sure.
And you too, you said your some students approaching you,
Yeah,
so you can maybe keep them in the mind and see what all they lack, some basic things.
yeah,
If
yeah,
you have at least a mental note of things that they
yeah.
generally lack, either in what they must have worked out earlier or which they should be working out now,
Mhm.
what all you
Yeah,
think will help them basically, we can put it out in a form that it will reach out to more
sure,
people.
sure,
And
absolutely.
yeah, now we're planning to start this biology dorm very soon. If you know
Okay.
the citizens of science thing, we have this
Yeah, I noticed.
specific dorms, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
dorm for each, and the idea of having a dorm is, I believe, lot of well, technical stuff. Yeah, your teachers teach you that, but apart from that, the career choices, advisors, opportunities, and all, a lot of them you get to know only when you speak to your pardon, yeah, your seniors or the other stuff, and these are generally exchanged in dorms or cafes and stuff. So that's the whole idea of this. And it's just, and you're never really at your comfort zone when you're asking your professor, right? Because you're ultimately at the end of the day, you're worried if they judge you, or you might think it's too stupid to ask, too basic, whatever.
yeah,
So these, I believe, are much more. One will be at much more of a comfort zone. So that would be good. Yeah, certainly. We're looking forward to work with you as well, right? Yeah.
yeah. It's nice to have someone explicitly say that they're here to help you and that they're free and they have time for you. Because otherwise, you're like, oh, this person is busy. This person is too senior. I cannot approach them. But if, as people who actively study science and like maybe are a bit more experienced, I would say, not better, but more experienced, I think it's a responsibility to be there for younger scientists and help them learn the things that they lack. So yeah, this sounds like a great idea. I'm really glad you're doing it.
Like
Yeah.
just for example, like there are so many scholarship applications which actually happen a year before you need it, but most students are unaware of the deadline and they get to know only when it's too late. Or
Yeah,
say like if someone wants to apply for masters abroad, then they need to start working on their SOPs a year before, or at least say 8 months before, because applications start. But most people are unaware at that point. They're still like, okay, we're still
yeah,
in college, we'll figure out next year, but next year is too late. So maybe we could talk more about these aspects, like what exactly we should know from the very first year of our bachelor's degree so that we don't miss out on deadlines or miss out on the information and it
yeah.
becomes too late to apply.
No, I agree completely. But just to tack on to that, and I don't want to take up too much time. I think it's also important at that point to realize that if you don't know these things at that level, it's also okay. It's fine to be a little late to the party and figure things out at that point. You're not losing anything by losing 1 year. It's not the end of the world. But we could talk about, for example, what students could do in gap years, should they happen to take them, and how they could then use that time and space to improve their CVs or improve their applications. I think it's equally important.
Yeah, certainly. Like so many people end up doing that and then they're confused or they feel that they're just wasting here. But there's so many things you could do, like research or whatever, independent studies in that 1 year. So maybe
Yeah,
you could tell us about that also.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the like the Indian science community is very complex because we deal with people from very different backgrounds all the time,
Yes.
and it saddens me to see that there's so much of privilege that comes to play in this situation because Some people do have the time and space and the luxury of spending this as they like to further the series, but most people don't have the space, and this is something that's really sad. And there are exploitative situations also where you're expected to volunteer to improve your CV. No, don't do that. Just don't do that. They're exploiting you. So yeah, we should talk about these things, but when you would like.
Yeah, so, right. So that's all, I guess. Right? Anyone
Yeah,
have
thanks a
anything
lot.
else to ask or something? Otherwise we can wind it up, right? Again, thanks a lot, Sai, for agreeing for all of this. Thanks for your valuable time.
No, thank you.
Right. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Bye bye. See ya.
Feel free to
Thanks
contact me
so
in the
much.
comments. So if my answers in this interview were not like were not satisfying enough for you and you want to know more, let me know.
No, I think
Uh,
like for now they were very detailed and very informative. So that's not going to be the problem. But we could talk certainly later about the other
Feel
issues
free to
we
get back in touch
discussed.
with me. Absolutely anytime. I'm happy to talk.
Thank you so much
right.
for that.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Bye
Bye bye,
bye.
guys. Yeah.
Okay, bye.